Today we are going to be revealing our power rankings for week 16 of the 2024 NFL season. Can't believe it's already week 16. Season's flown by, but without further ado, let's get into one of the last power rankings of the season. So the first group we have are the bottom feeder groups, the, I think, consensus worst teams. Giants at 32, Patriots at 31, and the Raiders at 30. Neither of these three teams moved for me. Giants blown out by the Ravens at home. Patriots blown out by the Cardinals. And then the Raiders, they actually kept it somewhat close versus the Falcons. They had a chance there. But in that game, never seemed like they could have won it, even if the score was close. You never really felt like the Raiders had a chance to win that. So I think this is the proper order to keep them. I think the Raiders, since the end score was close, I think they deserve to be above the Giants and the Patriots. It pretty much went by like point differential. Like the Giants lost by like 20, Patriots lost by like 13 or 17, and the Raiders lost by like 6. But I think that's consensus, the three worst teams. Next group we have is the bad teams, but the somewhat competitive bad teams. At least you trust them to be more competitive than the other teams. That's the Titans at 29, Browns at 28, Jags at 27, Panthers at 26, and the Bears at 25. Titans at 29. I know the end score looks like it was close versus the Bengals. It wasn't too super close. But I do trust their defense in terms of, if the Titans were to play the Raiders, Patriots, or Giants, I would confidently pick the Titans. I think they're just a little bit better than those three teams. But I do think the four teams above them it's marginal, but I do think they're much better than them as well. I think the Titans are kind of an outlier. Browns at 28, we've seen them compete with many teams. Yeah, they lost. They didn't look good against the Chiefs. The Chiefs defense just picked the Browns apart. Like, Jameis couldn't do anything. And they only were put up 7 points, so. But they have shown that they can compete and win with Jameis there. Jags at 27, they stuck in there with the Jets. They were pretty good. The game came down to the wire. Mac Jones actually has been playing pretty decent on the Jags. Brian Thomas had an incredible game. Their defense just let them down, allowing the Jets to put up 30 is never a good thing. However, they beat the Titans recently, and they have been playing better recently. And then the Panthers and Bears are kind of in the same little group here. They both were losing games, but in competitive ways. So they were both climbing up the rankings above these other sort of bad teams. But they both just came off of pretty bad performances. Panthers did not look good against the Cowboys at all. Bears kind of were in it against the Vikings early on, but then it kind of fell apart for them as well. So I think they're in that group that they were rising the ranks from being competitive, and then they both just had bad games. So I moved them both down below the teams that have shown a little more consistency. But again, I think the future is going in the right direction for these two teams. And I think, although they both had bad weeks this most recent week, the last month of football that both these two teams have played, I think, shows promise for them and the way they were able to compete also as well. Now, this next group is a big one. This is sort of the not good teams, but not bad teams group. Like, I feel like all these teams are, you never know how these teams are going to play. Like, 1 minute they're really good, 1 minute they're really bad. I know that's a lot of teams, pretty much every team. But I just don't know how to, analyze any of these teams right now, on a week-to-week basis. With the Cowboys at 24, the Jets at 23, Saints at 22, the Colts at 21, the 49ers at 20, the Falcons at 19, and the Bengals at 18. So the Cowboys 24, big win versus the Panthers. I thought they deserved to, especially not only jump the Panthers, but also get into that little third group there. As Cooper Rush actually has not played that bad of football. He actually had a pretty good game against the Panthers this most recent week. But overall, he hasn't played awful. Jets at 23, Aaron Rodgers. We thought he had his best game against Miami. Turns out that wasn't his best game. This most recent week was his best game. Davante Adams had his best week as a game as a Packer. almost 200 yards, 2 touchdowns. They had that clutch. They had that game-winning drive where Davante Adams. It was pretty much just Davante Adams until Breece Hall got that touchdown. So they've played much better recently. The Saints at 22. I know they lost to the Commanders, whereas the teams like the Jets and Cowboys won. It was a close game against the Commanders, and frankly, you could argue that they should have won on that last. They could have won on that end of play, but then you could bring in like the refs stopping the clock when they shouldn't have. But they kept it close with the Commanders, a team that probably should have beat them by a lot more. So I do feel like they should get credit. And they were already 23 to begin with, so. And then Colts and Niners, they both lost pretty underwhelmingly. Niners, it was a close game, but you put up 6 points. I know it was raining, but you put up 6 points against the Rams defense, who isn't an elite defense. So that definitely was disappointing. And the Colts, when Jonathan Taylor dropped the ball before the goal line, it just went downhill for the Colts. I mean, the game was competitive in like the first half, but it shouldn't have been. The Colts offense didn't do anything against the Broncos. So I think they deserve to drop. Those two teams deserve to drop below the Bengals and Falcons, who jumped them, essentially. Bengals, I know they only beat the Titans by 10, but it could have been a lot more than that. They played great. Defense still continues to be questionable. They did pick off Will Levis, I think, 2 or 3 times, though. Don't know if that's a indicator of a good defense or not. But and then the Falcons at 19, you got to win versus the Raiders, but it was a very ugly win. You even needed a safety just to make it like a 6-point win or whatever it was. And that game was just Kirk Cousins. It's not a good Raiders defense. If it wasn't for Bijan having the good game he had and that one touchdown to Drake London, the Raiders could have beat the Falcons, and that's not good. However, they did get a win, whereas teams like the Niners, Colts, and Saints lost. So I did want to move them up, although I'm still not in on the Falcons at all. Next group, we have the Dolphins at 17, Cardinals at 16, Seahawks at 15, and Rams at 14. This is the NFC West plus the Dolphins. I would take these 4 teams to beat 18 through 24, but they've been up and down. Dolphins, it was a close game versus the Texans, but Tua did not play good at all. Their offense did not look good. That was their bright spot, was their offense was slowly figuring out with Tua. The offense did not play. I come to play against the Texans. I know it's a good Texans defense, but that offense just did not look good at all. But again, I think just based on what they've shown overall as a complete team, they deserve to stay above the Falcons and Bengals and Niners. And then the rest of the NFC West falls in 14 through 16 here. I know the Seahawks won, or the Seahawks lost, and the Cardinals won. I know that. But Seahawks did beat them 2 weeks ago, and I think the Seahawks have been a little more consistent than the Cardinals. And the Rams, it was an ugly win, but it was a win nonetheless, whereas the Seahawks lost and the Cardinals beat up on a bad Patriots team. So I think it's fair to rank, if you were to rank those 3 teams, it's fair to go Rams, Seahawks, Cardinals. But they're just such similar teams, and this race for this division is so close that I think it's fair to keep them grouped together, and I think they do deserve to be. I think the Niners should be slightly out of that grouping. They just haven't been even close to as good as the other 3 teams. Next, we have the playoff contenders, but maybe not Super Bowl contender teams. Just outside the playoffs, like they can sneak in the playoffs. All these teams will probably make the playoffs, but I don't know how far they'll go in the playoffs. The Chargers at 13, Texans at 12, Bucks at 11, Commanders at 10, Broncos at 9. There's a chance that all these teams make it and they all lose in the first round. I don't know if that's possible, but Chargers at 13, they were playing great, but then they go and play Tampa, and their strong suit, which has been their defense, does not come to play. Baker and the Bucks put up 40 in LA as well. Although I do still think they're a better team than the Texans, and I do think they would beat the Texans in a head-to-head. Texans did get a win, whereas the Chargers lost by like almost 30, and the Texans do have a better record than the Chargers. So I decided to keep the Texans at 12. over the Chargers at 13. However, I did decide I think it was right for the Bucs to get a big boost after their huge win over the Chargers. Commanders at 10. The only reason they didn't go higher is because they could have potentially lost to the Saints, whereas the Bucs were never going to lose to the Chargers. However, they did get a win, so I think they deserve to be above the Bucs still. And then the Broncos, very good win versus the Colts. It was a close game despite them outplaying the Colts by a pretty good margin, pretty good amount. But then they pulled away towards the end there, and they had a very impressive win. However, I wouldn't put them quite in the tier of teams that I trust to win a playoff game. I just think rookie quarterback, same with the Commanders at 10, that it might not work out maybe first year. So I wouldn't necessarily trust them to win their first playoff game. But I don't think if you're a Broncos or Commanders fan and you lose in the first round, I don't think you're upset at all. I think the strides they've made is enough as a fan, at least if I were a fan, to get excited. Next group, we have the playoff contenders that can win some games, but I don't know if they're going to win the Super Bowl. Maybe then plus the Ravens. But we have the Steelers at 8, Packers at 7, Ravens at 6, and Vikings at 5. It was pretty much Steelers. Last week it was Steelers at 5, and then these three teams 6 through 8. However, Vikings got a big win over the Bears, Ravens got a big win over the Giants, and the Packers got a big win over the Seahawks, while the Steelers lost to the Eagles. So I think it just makes sense to bump those three teams up and then knock the Steelers to the bottom. I didn't want to put them below teams like the Broncos, Commanders, or Bucs because they're still a 10-plus win team. They're still a very good team. They just had an off game versus another really good Eagles team. But I do think it was deserving to put them below the Packers, Ravens, and Vikings, as they have also are at 10-plus wins. I don't know if the Ravens might be at 10. I'm not sure. But they got big wins. Steelers lost. But they're still right there. And then lastly, we have the tier of teams that I would actually have good confidence of winning the whole thing. Chiefs at 4, Eagles at 3, Lions at 2, and Bills at 1. I know the Chiefs, they played the Browns. I know not a great team, but they got their first double-digit win, potentially, I think, of the season. I don't even think they beat the Raiders by more than double digits. They were in control of that game from like the beginning. Their defense completely shut down Jameis Winston. It wasn't that Jameis Winston threw a lot of touchdowns and threw a lot of picks. He just threw a lot of picks. He even got benched in the game for DTR. So Chiefs defense completely shut down the Browns, and their offense did enough. We'll see about Mahomes' injury. It didn't look good. The tackle didn't look good, but they said he's week to week, so we'll see about that. But I think they deserve to keep their spot at 4. Eagles at 3. Almost a dominating win over the Steelers. It was kind of a close game, but it wasn't too far off from a blowout. Jalen Hurts proved all the haters wrong about his passing game. They said he couldn't pass, and then he had an excellent passing game against an excellent Steelers defense. I think it was a little banged up, but still a great game from Hurts. I think deserves to keep that 3 spot. But I didn't want to move him quite above. I don't think the Eagles are in that tier of the Bills and Lions. It was always the Lions as the number 1 team, but Bills came into Detroit, and they could have won by a lot too if the Lions weren't a really good team. They were in control of that game early. Lions came back, almost had a chance to pull off a miracle, but Josh Allen, the MVP, more likely than not will win the MVP, goes into Detroit, beats the best team in football. I think it's deserving for them to keep that 1 spot, especially because they were at 2. But I didn't want to put the Lions below the Eagles because they still almost won that game with all the injuries they have, and they got more. Like Montgomery's out for the year. Aleem McNeil, I think, is out for the year. But Aiden Hutchinson could come back if they make the Super Bowl. You never know. But I didn't want to move the Lions below the Eagles or Chiefs, as it was just one game against a top 2 team in football. So that will conclude my power rankings for Week 16 of the 2024 season. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like, Comment down below your thoughts and opinions on these power rankings and maybe some of your own rankings as well. And also, make sure to hit the subscribe button if you don't want to miss more. Really helps. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.